Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 1812 Objects to Discover, a series of 3 vignettes showcasing unreleased artifacts of the Château Ramsay in connection with certain characters and events that took place during the War of 1812. In this vignette entitled 1812, Tecumseh and the Native American Approach, you'll learn more about the Shawnee leader, a hero of 1812, as well as his brother Tenskwatawa, also known as the Prophet, and discover along the way some painters and illustrators who delved into the Indian question and left a legacy of works such as Huron painter Zachary Vincent and the American artist George Catlin and his Indian Gallery. Please join me on a most informative journey through history. Before Canada became a nation, the military alliances between the United Kingdom and the First Nations formed a key element in the defense of British North America. In Canada, the War of 1812 took place on 3 fronts: the Western Great Lakes, the Niagara region, and in the St. Lawrence Valley. In each region, the warriors of 50 mixed descent and First Nations communities fought alongside the British because of their common goal: to resist American expansion. One of the most important leaders who helped defend Canada against the Americans was indisputably Tecumseh, the Shawnee warrior chief. The time Tecumseh was chief had a considerable impact on the future of tribes throughout the region, because he and his brother Tenskwatawa, the Prophet that we'll talk about later, tried to unite the northeastern, central, and southern tribes in one confederation. An opportunity has presented itself to us. Indeed, a chance like it will never happen again. For us, the first peoples of North America, to gather in a great combination and join the British in this war. Although many illustrations, drawings, and paintings of Tecumseh were made, the most common image is the one you see on the screen. It's based on a pencil sketch by Pierre Ledru, a Creole portraitist and merchant. This sketch was subsequently modified by an anonymous British officer who added a royal medal and a red coat with military epaulettes. This illustration apparently served as a reference for the 1815 drawing by Zachary Vincent, or Tellery Olin, a painter and illustrator born in the Huron village of Lorette, where he became chief. The typical Indian facial characteristics Zachary Vincent inherited, combined with the desire to perpetuate a traditional way of life, helped to reinforce the idea that he was the last of the Hurons. A picture by Henry Daniel Fielk, painted in 1838, shows Vincent wearing a traditional headdress, while other Huron notables sport fashionable beaver pelt top hats. This original painting depicts the reception of Robert Sim, a Quebec merchant who was elected honorary chief of the Lorette Huron tribe. During the same period, painter Antoine Plamondon, an ancestor of songwriter Luc Plamondon, a native from Ancienne Lorette, produced a full-length portrait of Vincent. Here's an interesting anecdote. Lord Durham, who had just landed in Quebec as the new governor, bought his painting. This painting hugely influenced Vincent, who undertook to produce a series of self-portraits in rebuttal. It's interesting to note that Zachary Vincent was the first member of the Huron community to undertake a career as a painter following the Western academic tradition. He produced more than 600 works of art. But another character deserves our attention. It's Tenskwatawa, Tecumseh's brother, who we see in this engraving by George Catlin entitled The Shawnee Prophet. Following an accident that occurred in 1805, which left him temporarily unconscious, Tenskwatawa, the Prophet, claimed to receive messages from the Master of Life and became famous for preaching a revival of mystic Native American faith. In November 1811, in the absence of his brother, he engaged the American army in battle at Tippecanoe. The American forces were led by William Henry Harrison, the future 9th President of the United States. Tenskwatawa was beaten on the battlefield, and his warriors, who were supposed to be protected from the bullets under his protection, suffered heavy casualties. Not one to accept defeat, in revenge, the prophet apparently cast a curse on all U.S. leaders elected in a year ending with a 0. Legend has it that these leaders were condemned to die during their tenure. As proof, 7 U.S. presidents have been affected by this curse, known as the Curse of Tecumseh, starting with William Henry Harrison. But Ronald Reagan, elected in 1980, did not die during his term, so it seems that he managed to break the spell. Now we'll return to the 19th century engraving, Portraits of Shawanoe, where we see 2 Shawanoe or Shawnee in traditional clothing. Here's a good opportunity to discover a major, underrated ethnographic undertaking comprising over 600 works of art by George Catlin, an American painter. In 1845, at the Louvre Museum in Paris, George Catlin presented his Indian Gallery, the very first true museum of anthropology open to the public, consisting of portraits, collections of objects, and representations of Indians, some of which made the trip with him. Catlin's impact was considerable both in popular culture, newspapers and pictures, and on the younger generations of artists. From Baudelaire to Georges Sand, Romantics found in his works the foundation for a new aesthetic in which all forms of creation other than academic, other arts played a major role. Tecumseh and the 2,000 warriors he led fought throughout the Western Campaign in the War of 1812. His support to Major General Isaac Brock assured the successful capture of Detroit, and Brock apparently offered Tecumseh his belt as a sign of respect. But Tecumseh's death on October 5, 1813, at the Battle of the Thames, or Moravian Town, dealt a terrible blow to the fragile unity of the Western First Nations. Here's a beautiful ink-on-paper illustration by a New York painter and illustrator, Alonzo Chappell, entitled Battle of the Thames, Death of Tecumseh. Several hypotheses remain regarding the origin of the fatal bullet that killed Tecumseh. His grave has never been found. The Chateau Ramsay also has this dagger, or knife, if you will. It seems to be one of the few objects known to have belonged to Tecumseh. Its blade is made of wrought iron, and its handle is made of wood reinforced with copper wire. This dagger was presented by Louis-François Georges Baby, an avid collector and known philanthropist who distributed his treasures to a number of institutions, including the Chateau Ramsay. His ancestors include James Baby, who was a colonel in the militia in 1812. He was at Fort Malden during the occupation of Hull and returned to Sandwich not far from the Thames River after the capture of Detroit. Then he was taken prisoner at the Battle of the Thames after seeing Tecumseh die a few paces from him. Thomas Verchères, a militiaman who participated in the battles of Detroit and the Thames River, described in Guerre sur la rivière Détroit, page 143, a dinner at Baby's home, the Duff Baby Manor, just before the retreat up the Thames River, suggesting that Tecumseh had this knife with him at the time. The day after my unexpected arrival at Mr. James Baby's home, this gentleman threw a welcoming banquet inviting General Proctor and some other officers of the 41st and Artillery, as well as the celebrated Shawnee chief Tecumseh. Tecumseh sat on my left with his pistols on each side of his plate and his large hunting knife in front of him. In 1848, Queen Victoria had military medals and ribbons made for the survivors of the troops who took part in the 1793 to 1814 campaigns. De Salaberry received a gold medal, and the Chateauguay fighters received a total of over 300 medals, nearly a quarter of which were granted to Indian warriors. However, very few warriors survived in 1848, and it's probable that many of those who were entitled to medals never claimed them. Therefore, there are very few medals in circulation that bear an Indian name. It's interesting to note, however, that 2 members of Zachary Vincent's family, Louis and Stanislas, fought under de Salaberry's command and were decorated with Chateauguay medals. They stood out for having swum across the Chateauguay River in pursuit of the enemy. Let's take a look at the medal. Made of metal with red and blue ribbon, it belonged to, as we can read on its edge, Sergeant Benjamin Blanchet. In addition to a silver bar, marked Châteauguay. The front bears a bust of Queen Victoria. On the reverse, we see standing Britannia crowning Wellington as he kneels before her with a British lion lying at his feet and the caption, "To the British Army," and date 1793-1814. In conclusion, more than 10,000 First Nations warriors participated in almost every major battle of the War of 1812. According to many British commanders, these important victories were largely attributable to the contribution of the First Nations allies. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave you with this question that comes to mind. In your opinion, were the Indians the biggest losers of this war?